Welcome to today's historical deep dive. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. It's a world built on earth and fear, where the line between miracle and misery is thinner than a pauper's blanket. We spend so much time looking at kings and castles, battles and cathedrals. But what about the calloused hands that built them, the aching backs that fed them, the quiet, unknown souls who simply tried to live through another day? If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know, allowing us to uncover more of these hidden corners of history. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Would you be a farmer, a miller, a laundress, a wandering pardoner? Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. You don't wake gently. You jolt awake, stomach protesting the thin gruel of last night, a phantom ache already settling into your bones. The air in the single room is thick with the cold dampness that seems to seep not just from the packed earth floor, but through the very wattle and daub walls. Your eyes adjust slowly in the gray pre-dawn light, filtering hesitantly through the smoke hole in the roof and the crack under the ill-fitting door. You are tangled in scratchy wool blankets and pungent straw bedding, sharing what little warmth there is with your family, crammed onto the single sleeping platform like bundled twigs. Your breath plumes in the frigid air, a transient ghost in the gloom. The fire in the hearth is long dead, a pile of cold ash where embers glowed hours ago, now offering only the memory of heat. Aching joints protest with a low groan as you carefully extract yourself from the sleeping mass without disturbing the others. Your bare feet recoil instinctively from the shock of the cold earth floor. This is the daily resurrection, not of spirit, but of flesh, rising from a brief, restless sleep to face the unyielding physical demands of survival. There is no soft transition into the day, no lingering warmth, no moment for reflection. Life is immediate, physical, and often painful. Your body is not just yours, it is a tool granted for labor, and it must be put to work, regardless of its weariness or the protests of hunger. The concept of rest, as we understand it today, restorative, purposeful downtime, is a luxury unimaginable here. Rest is merely the absence of active labor or immediate threat, a fragile truce with exhaustion. Every dawn is a quiet, uncelebrated victory, a silent signal that the cold, the gnawing hunger, or the pervasive illness of the night didn't claim you, or someone precious sharing your scarce warmth. It's a triumph repeated over thousands upon thousands of mornings, often without conscious thought. The psychological impact of this constant, low-grade hardship, this ever-present specter of mortality looming just beyond firelight, shapes a deep, pragmatic resilience we can barely comprehend from our temperature-controlled, well-fed, medically buffered present. It forces an absolute, relentless focus on the essentials: food, warmth, shelter, the health of family, and the elusive hope of God's mercy. You are a creature tethered irrevocably to the earth's unforgiving cycle. Your fate dictated by forces far larger than yourself. The unpredictable weather that can drown crops. The success or failure of the harvest that dictates the next year's hunger. The often arbitrary whim of the Lord who owns your labor. And the inscrutable will of God, whose favor must be constantly sought and feared. In our modern world, we are taught to fight against limits, to push boundaries, to pursue endless choice. In yours, you do not fight limits. You navigate them like a small boat on a vast, often stormy sea. Was it faith that saved them? Or just the sheer exhaustion that left no room for despair? You wake in the single room that is your world. The fire from last night is long dead, and a chill seeps from the packed earth floor up into your straw pallet. Beside you, your wife breathes shallowly. Your children huddle close, their small bodies seeking warmth. The air is thick, heavy with the constant, lingering scent of old smoke, damp earth, and the undeniable smell of bodies that share this confined space. Sometimes, if the wind is wrong or the weather harsh enough to bring the animals in, there's the acrid tang of livestock from the adjoining lean-to. This room, roughly built, is everything. The walls are thin, just woven branches plastered with mud and dung. A poor shield against the relentless wind or biting frost. You can feel the cold finding its way through the cracks. Above, the thatched straw roof offers slightly better protection, but it's a living thing, harboring spiders in its dry corners, and occasionally the frantic scratching of mice seeking shelter or stray grains. When the hearth is lit, as it will be soon for the morning's meager pottage, smoke will fill this space, choking, making eyes water, before slowly, reluctantly, finding its way out the smoke hole in the roof, coating everything in a persistent layer of dark soot. Your few possessions reside in a small, rough-hewn wooden chest. A change of tunic, if you are truly fortunate. A handful of worn tools for the fields. Perhaps an iron pot. A treasure handed down. There are no separate rooms here. Sleeping, eating, working, living, dying. It all happens within these four permeable walls. This dwelling is more than just shelter. It is a physical manifestation of your place in the world. It rises directly from the land you work, built with materials taken from the fields and forests around you. And one day, it will return to that earth, leaving little trace. It is small, not just because materials are scarce, but because space itself is a resource to be carefully managed. Wood for framing is precious, something you don't waste on unnecessary divisions. This lack of physical boundaries inside mirrors the porous nature of life outside. Privacy, as we understand it, is a foreign, almost nonsensical concept. Everyone here hears everything, sees everything. Your arguments with your wife, your child's cries in the night, the intimate moments of your marriage. They are all, to some degree, communal experiences within this small space. Your life is an open book, read by neighbors who live just as openly, judged by the ancient, unwritten standard. In our modern lives, where we retreat into detached houses, lock our doors, and often view neighbors with wary distance, we prize personal space and privacy above almost everything else. Our homes are fortresses of solitude. This hut reminds us that for the vast majority of human history, community was an inescapable, often uncomfortable, but essential necessity. It was a source of mutual support in times of sickness or hardship, but also a constant scrutinizing gaze, a relentless pressure to conform. This hut, this fragile shell against the elements, is technically yours, yes, built with your own hands and the help of your neighbors, but it sits on the Lord's land, a stark reminder that your very dwelling is conditional. Was this constant closeness a crushing weight, a suffocating lack of self, or did it forge bonds of interdependence we can barely comprehend today? Ask yourself, if your every struggle, every joy, every failure was visible, known, and potentially judged by those around you, would you fold in on yourself? Or would it force a brutal honesty, a raw connection that modern life has smoothed away? This dwelling is more than earth and straw. It is a lesson in vulnerability, community, and the cost of belonging. You step outside, the weak light a pale wash across the frost-tinged ground. It is early, always early. The cold bites, settling deep into joints that already ache from yesterday's unending toil. The field waits. It is the central character in your life's drama, a demanding master whose moods dictate hunger or plenty. Today, perhaps, it is plowing, the slow, arduous rhythm of breaking the earth. The heavy wooden plow, crudely fashioned but indispensable, resists the soil, clinging as you push, straining. If you are fortunate, a team of oxen, breathing steam into the crisp air, pulls the weight. Their great, patient heads bowed, they lean into the harness, their strength borrowed, their cost high. If not, it is your strength, your muscles burning, your lungs heaving against the resistance of the ancient ground. The soil is heavy, dark, clinging stubbornly to the crude iron or hardened wood of the plowshare. It demands constant effort, a relentless forward push against nature's inertia. Your back aches, a dull, constant throb. Your hands, already calloused and rough, blister where the wood rubs raw. Or maybe it is weeding, a never-ending battle against invasive life forms, thistles, nettles, stubborn roots, all determined to steal the vital nutrients from your precious grain. Hours blur into a single posture, bending, pulling, tearing at the relentless green invaders. Sweat drips, not onto distant city streets, but onto the same earth you were born from, the same earth that will one day receive your spent body. This isn't just farming. It is a direct, physical negotiation with the fundamental forces of life and death. Your very survival, the survival of your family, is literally rooted in this ground. You understand this truth in your bones, in the ache of your muscles, in the gnawing fear that tightens your gut during a long, dry spell. The fertility of the soil, whether it yields bounty or stubborn rock, the timing of the rain, too much washing the seed away, too little leaving it to wither, the absence of blight, of rust, of pests like voles or locusts that can devour a season's hope in days. These are not abstract concepts debated in distant halls of learning. They are matters of immediate, visceral, terrifying importance. They are the difference between eating through the winter or facing the slow, humiliating death by starvation that is a constant, lurking shadow. You read the soil not like a book of parchment and ink, but like a sacred text written in dirt and texture. You understand its moods, its needs, its promises, and its betrayals. You know the subtle difference in color that speaks of richness or depletion. You feel the moisture level between your thumb and forefinger, predicting thirst or impending rot. You smell the health or sickness rising from the turned furrow. This intimate, physical, almost spiritual relationship with the source of all sustenance is something almost entirely lost to us in our time. We buy our food, pre-washed and packaged, from shelves that are always miraculously full, disconnected from the labor, the risk, the uncertainty of its production. We complain about prices, about convenience, about packaging, rarely giving a second thought to the colossal, back-breaking effort, the constant gamble against unpredictable forces that was the daily bread of over 90% of humanity for millennia. We have outsourced our fundamental dependence on the natural world, forgotten the humbling reminder that our existence hangs by threads woven from sunlight, water, and soil. We live in a world where a bad harvest means a slight rise in grocery costs. They lived in a world where a bad harvest meant watching children sicken and die. This profound disconnect is perhaps the most unsettling legacy of progress, a quiet melancholy humming beneath the surface of our convenience. The Church speaks of divine will, of saints and miracles, and yes, you pray for rain, you light candles at the village shrine, but the prayers feel most potent, most real, whispered into the damp earth as you plant the seed, or murmured over the struggling shoots during a drought. Is it faith that truly sustains you in these moments, or the sheer, desperate will to survive, manifested in calloused hands and aching back? You see neighbors perform rituals you suspect are ancient, pagan, not sanctioned by the priest, burying charms in the field. When the belly is empty, ancient fears and forbidden hopes rise to the surface, closer than any distant heaven. Ask yourself, living this life bound to the soil's unforgiving calendar, where choice feels like a luxury only the Lords possess, would you find freedom in this fundamental connection, or feel utterly trapped by its relentless demands? Could you read the sermons written in the dirt and find meaning enough to survive? Or would the sheer, brutal physicality break you? This life is a constant, humbling reminder of humanity's fundamental dependence on the natural world, a dependence we have largely outsourced and forgotten, often to our peril. The quiet legacy of these lives is not written in chronicles or stone towers, but in the enduring knowledge held by the soil itself, in the cycles they understood intimately, cycles we now observe from a distance as curious outsiders. They lived by the soil, died by the soil, and in doing so, built the very ground upon which our world stands, though we rarely acknowledge their invisible foundation. The first light, grudging and gray, seeps through the cracks in the wattled walls. You rise stiffly from the straw pallet shared with your family, the chill clinging to your bones. The fire is quickly coaxed back to life, a precious warmth against the pervasive damp. Your first task, after perhaps a hurried prayer to the saints for protection through the coming day, is the morning meal. There is no ceremony, no choice. There is only the pottage. It sits in a common pot, a thick. This is not the colorful, varied bounty you might imagine from modern kitchens. This is survival in a bowl. Typically, it's a slow-cooked medley of whatever the land has yielded or stored. Dried peas and beans, perhaps some oats or barley simmered into a starchy base. If the season has been kind, maybe a few foraged root vegetables, like parsnips or wild carrots, add a whisper of sweetness, or some bitter greens gathered from the edges of the field. But mostly, it is legumes and grain, simmered for hours until they break down into a comforting, if monotonous, porridge. Meat is a dream, a rare luxury you might taste a few times a year. A small, precious piece of salted pork, saved from the brutal efficiency of the autumn slaughter. Or some dried fish, if you live near water, and fortune smiled upon the nets. But for most, animal protein is a scattering of tiny, hard eggs from your few scrawny, perpetually hungry chickens, or the reliable, earthy richness of the peas and beans themselves. Bread is the other anchor of your diet, dark and heavy, usually made from the heartier rye or barley, a dense block of essential calories. You break off a hunk, using it sometimes to scoop the pottage, or simply eating it alongside. A wooden spoon might be shared among the family, or you might simply dip your fingers into the warm, thick mixture. This humble meal is more than just food. It is a daily, visceral lesson in the precariousness of life and the brutal reality of scarcity. There is no concept of picky eating, no debate over what to have. You eat what the earth provides, what the weather allows, what your labor and God's grace have delivered to your pot. To waste even a single pea is unthinkable, a sin against necessity. Hunger isn't a temporary discomfort you ease with a snack. It's a constant, dull ache in your belly, a gnawing worry that sharpens your prayers for a good harvest. The sheer, overwhelming abundance of food in the modern world, the endless aisles of choices, the expectation of diverse flavors at every meal. It would not just be bewildering, it would feel like a miracle beyond comprehension, perhaps even witchcraft. Your bowl of pottage, bland and repetitive though it may be, is a testament to survival, the successful outcome of back-breaking work under an indifferent sky. It highlights a profound disconnection in our world today, where the origins of our food are a mystery to most, and our food worries often concern convenience or variety, rather than the life or death struggle against starvation that shaped the lives of the vast majority of humanity for millennia. This simple, necessary meal grounds us in that fundamental human need, a hunger that still drives billions today. Consider this pottage, this taste of survival. Would your spirit accept such monotony, such lack of choice? Or would it wither under the constant pressure of need? The air hums with the low drone of shared labor. You are bent double in the communal field, your hands rough with soil, working shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors. Old Thomas is on your left, his back permanently bowed. Young Elsbeth chatters nervously beside you, worried about the cloud cover. The rhythm of the sighs, the grunts of effort, the shared sweat under the indifferent sun. This is the pulse of your life. Your small hut is merely one amongst many, clustered around the solid stone anchor of the church. Maybe within sight of the slightly grander, slightly more imposing manor or bailiff's house. You know the smell of every hearth in the village, the sound of every barking dog, the particular limp of Agnes down the lane, and they know yours. There is no privacy here, not in the way you might imagine it. Doors are left ajar, conversations drift across muddy paths, and every action, every absence, is noted. When your child is sick, every woman in the village knows. When your pig escapes its pen, everyone sees you chasing it. This constant visibility creates a powerful, unwritten social contract. You work the strip of land allocated to your family in the common fields, but your fate is tied to the collective harvest. If your neighbors fail, your own meager store feels less secure. Tools are borrowed, oxen are shared for plowing, and in the bleakest months, a family with a little more might share a bowl of stew with one who has less. This interdependence is not charity, it is the bedrock of survival. Gossip, quicker than any horseman, binds this world together. A whisper begun at the well can destroy a reputation by sunset. Why was so-and-so late for Mass? Did that widow really see a will-o'-the-wisp? Or was she meeting someone? Was that sudden fever truly an illness, or punishment for a hidden sin? Reputation is fragile, built on years of observable conformity, and easily shattered by perceived deviance. To be seen as pious, hard-working, and a good neighbor, participation in village rituals, from blessing the fields to mourning the dead, reinforces belonging and demonstrates allegiance to the group. This closeness is a potent mixture of safety net and cage. You are never truly alone. There is always someone nearby, always a potential hand offered in need. But you are also rarely free from the watchful eyes of those who know you intimately. A stray thought voiced too loudly, a failure to attend, the pressure to conform, to melt into the expectations of the group is immense. Individuality is not celebrated, it is suspect. The needs and expectations of the village often outweigh your own desires or choices. Contrast this with our modern lives, where we can move through crowds of strangers, curate our online identities, and fiercely guard our personal autonomy. We crave connection, perhaps, but recoil from the loss of control and judgment that medieval village life imposed. Your village forces a brutal honesty about the trade-off. Deep security, belonging rooted in shared vulnerability, mutual reliance built on daily interaction, all in exchange for a complete surrender of privacy, the constant weight of collective scrutiny, and the requirement of absolute conformity. You are safe because you are seen, because you are known, because you fit in. But in that shared safety, you might just lose the quiet space to be entirely yourself. Ask yourself, could you live under this unblinking collective gaze? Your flaws exposed? Your life an open book for judgment? Could you truly survive without the anonymous choices we take for granted? Or would you bend, slowly, inevitably, just enough to fit the mold the village demands? The muck clings to your worn leather shoes as the bell tolls, not for prayer this time, but for labor. The sun isn't even a promise yet, just a gray smear above the eastern woods. This isn't your patch of earth you walk towards. It's the Lord's domain, His personal fields that demand your strength before your own meager strip sees the light. You are bound in ways the modern mind struggles to grasp, not just to the land itself, but to the man who claims ownership over it and you. Your status, serf or free tenant, dictates the precise weight of your chains. But chains they are. Your back aches even before you reach the furrow. Hours will be spent here, turning heavy soil or scything ripe grain, sweat stinging your eyes. This is time stolen directly from the work needed on your family's own strip, the patch of earth that must feed you come winter. But the Lord's harvest comes first. Always. Beside you, Thomas coughs, the same hacking sound that plagues half the village after a damp spring. He knows, like you, that working the Lord's fields means less time mending your own fences, less time weeding your own rows. It's a deliberate drain, a system designed to keep you dependent. Then there's the constant gaze of the bailiff or the reeve. He rides the perimeter, a whip often clutched in a leather-gloved hand, watching, shouting commands, noting who lags, who dares rest too long. He is the Lord's hand made flesh, His presence a reminder that your body and your time are commodities owed. He tallies the days you've worked the domain, counts the bundles of flax or sacks of grain owed from your own harvest, the rent that ensures you keep the use of the land that isn't yours anyway. Beyond the labor and the rent, there are fees for nearly everything. Need flour? You must use the Lord's mill, paying a portion of your grain to grind your own harvest. Need to bake bread? The Lord's oven costs a fee. Brew ale? Pay a tax. Even the small inheritance left by a dying aunt might face a charge before it's truly yours. It's a relentless siphoning, 1,000 small cuts bleeding away your resources, your energy, your hope. Your labor creates wealth, but the vast majority flows upward, leaving you with just enough to subsist, to pay the next due, and to do it all again tomorrow. There's a heavy irony in knowing that the richness of the soil you turn today will feed the Lord's table, while your own children might face hunger if the winter is harsh. This constant drain breeds not necessarily outright rebellion. Resistance is a quick path to the cold road, but a deep, weary acceptance, a quiet understanding that this is the order of things. You complain about the bailiff, about the poor yield after spending too many days on the domain, but you bend, you survive. Ask yourself, could you endure a life where even the bread you bake, the beer you brew, a very harvest you reap from your own sweat, is subject to arbitrary fees and claims? Would you choose the precarious freedom of the outlaw? You bend your back to the Lord's hand, finding a strange, bitter stability in servitude? This wasn't abstract economics. It was the dirt under your fingernails, the ache in your bones, and the cart loaded with your grain rattling away down the track. It is a stark reminder that the fight for control over one's own labor, one's own time, is an ancient, vital human struggle. The wooden door groans open, and the cool, damp air of the village church washes over you. It smells of old stone, incense, and the gathered breath of 100 souls. This small building, sometimes little more than 4 walls and a thatched roof, is the very heart of your world, not just a place of worship, but the nexus where your earthly life collides with the eternal. You shuffle in, finding a space among your neighbors. The priest stands at the altar, his voice a low drone chanting in Latin, a language you grasp only in scattered phrases. The familiar rhythm and tone more important than the specific words. You know the stories, though. Every stained glass shard, if you're lucky enough to have glass, perhaps painted images if not, tells of saints who endured unimaginable suffering, of martyrs whose faith triumphed over fire, and of sinners cast into the gaping maw of hell. These tales, preached from the rough pulpit, whispered in hushed tones, are as real to you as the blisters on your hands. The priest, Father Thomas, is a figure of immense authority. He holds the keys, not to earthly wealth perhaps, but to your immortal soul. He mediates your relationship with the divine, administering the sacraments, the cleansing water of baptism, the bread and wine mystically transformed, the last rites whispered over the dying. He is the dispenser of advice, be it on settling a land dispute or repenting a lustful thought, and sometimes the stern voice of judgment. His pronouncements echo with the weight of heaven and the terrifying threat of eternal damnation. Fear of God's wrath, of offending the divine by deed or even thought, is a constant, low thrum beneath the surface of your days. And the devil, he is not a distant, abstract concept. He walks the misty woods, whispers temptations in your ear during idle moments, sends his demonic servants to spread disease and discord. When the harvest fails, despite back-breaking labor and fervent prayers, is it simply bad weather? Or is it a test of faith, perhaps even punishment, for some communal sin? When the coughing sickness sweeps through the village, taking young and old alike, is it bad air? Or is it the devil's work, or God's hand lifted in righteous anger? These events are not random misfortunes. They are signs, portents, battles in the eternal war for souls, played out on the stage of your earthly existence. You might wear a blessed amulet given by the priest, carved with symbols to ward off evil. You pray constantly, not just at church, but as you sew, as you cook, as you lie shivering in the dark. For the exceptionally fortunate, a pilgrimage to a saint's shrine might offer potent intercession, a desperate bargain struck with heaven. Faith is not a Sunday ritual. It is the very air you breathe, the filter through which all reality is perceived. It provides a framework for understanding a world that is confusing, brutal, and utterly unpredictable by human hand. It offers the only reliable hope, not for an easier life now, but for an afterlife free from pain and sorrow. It dictates the rhythm of your year. Feast days and fast days mark the passage of time as surely as the changing seasons. It enforces social order and moral guidelines, backed by the formidable authority of the Church, which can excommunicate you, cutting you off from the community and, far worse, from salvation. In a world without science as you know it, faith is the science. It explains the inexplicable, why some are born healthy and others weak, why fortunes rise and fall, why death comes without warning. We live in a world where science and secularism have pushed the divine to the margins for many, confined it to specific buildings or private thoughts. Your life, though, shows a world where the sacred and the mundane were inextricably linked, tangled together like wool and straw. Every act, from sharing bread to settling a quarrel, could be viewed through a spiritual lens, potentially earning merit or sin. This deep, practical, often fearful faith, intertwined with folk superstition and the terror of the unknown, reminds us of humanity's enduring need for meaning, for hope that transcends hardship, and for a way to confront the terrifying forces that seem to govern our lives, whether we name them God, fate, or simply chance. Ask yourself, in a world where every shadow might conceal a demon and every success might be divine grace, would you dare doubt? Or would the sheer terror of the unknown compel you to believe with every fiber, just to feel you had some tiny leverage against the overwhelming power of the heavens and the depths? The cough is not a sudden thing. It started as a tickle, a nuisance that kept your youngest restless through the long, cold nights. Now it rips through his small body, leaving him weak and breathless. An ache settles deep in your own joints, a heavy dread more than mere discomfort. This is not just a cold. This is a warning whispered by the body itself. A terrifying, unwelcome guest arrived at your door. In your world, a sustained cough, a burning fever, a joint swollen and hot to the touch. These are not temporary setbacks. They are the beginning of the end, potentially. There is no learned physician to call upon. Your village knows no university-trained doctor with books and complex theories. Your hope rests instead on the familiar figures you know. Perhaps the local wise woman, whose knowledge of herbs and poultices is a fragile thread of ancestral wisdom, passed down generation to generation like a precious, often tested heirloom. Or the priest, whose prayers and blessed holy water are seen as a direct plea to God, a shield against the demonic influences or divine displeasure believed to cause such suffering. You might yourself try bleeding, a dangerous, desperate act to balance the body's ill-understood humors, or applying poultices made from local plants, their efficacy uncertain, but their application a ritual of hope. Charms hang around necks or above doorways, flimsy barriers against the unseen spirits and malevolent forces whispered to be the true culprits behind sickness. The fear when illness strikes is a palpable presence in the small, crowded homes. It's the fear of contagion, that this invisible plague will spread through your family, through the village. It's the fear of losing a vital pair of hands. Yours, your spouse's, even an older child's, at a crucial time, like the harvest, when every back is needed to ensure survival through the lean winter. Most profoundly, it's the fear of death without confession, without receiving the last rites, leaving the soul vulnerable to eternal damnation. Death is not a distant abstraction to be avoided and rarely spoken of. It is a familiar visitor, knocking too often, taking young and old alike with brutal indifference. Your vulnerability to disease and injury is profound, a constant undercurrent of daily life. A simple cut from a farming tool can fester and kill. A twisted ankle can leave you permanently crippled, a burden on your family. There are no antibiotics, no concept of sterile procedure during childbirth or injury treatment. While you might wash your hands before eating, it is likely more a matter of ingrained custom or a simple desire for cleanliness before putting food in your mouth, rather than any understanding of microscopic germs you cannot see. The germ theory is a millennium away. Life is precarious, balanced on the edge of a blade, and the body, this vessel you inhabit, is astonishingly fragile. We live now in an age where medical knowledge has exploded, where vaccinations protect us from scourges that wiped out populations in your time, where a broken bone is fixed, not prayed over, and infection is fought with powerful drugs. We expect to live long, relatively healthy lives, and view death as something to be fought against at all costs, a failure of medicine rather than an inevitability. Your reality underscores just how recently in human history this expectation has become remotely possible. Your experience of illness, of constant proximity to death, highlights the sheer, unimaginable triumph of survival in the face of overwhelming odds. It reminds us of the immense, almost miraculous privilege of modern healthcare, a comfort and a shield that we navigate our lives with, often entirely taking for granted its quiet, life-giving power. Ask yourself, how much of their faith in remedies or rituals was true belief, and how much was the desperate human need for some kind of control in a world where your own body was a battleground you were destined to lose. The breath rattles beside you, small, too small. You know that sound. You've heard it before in the stillness of the hut, waiting for the dawn. It's the sound of a life hanging by a thread spun too fine. Children. They arrive raw and loud, a new hope in a world that offers little certainty. Each birth is a miracle. Yes, a blessing from above, a promise of extra hands for the unending toil. Support when your back finally gives out. A thread of your bloodline, stretching into the future. But they are also fragile tendrils in a field choked with frost. You've planted these seeds before, watched them sprout, only to see the blight take them before they could reach the sun. Burying a child becomes not routine, but a tragically familiar sorrow. The quiet hump in the graveyard earth speaks volumes of dreams unfulfilled, of a future snatched away. The joy of birth is a brief, burning candle held against the persistent darkness of knowing that this tiny, pink life is surrounded by invisible wolves. Fever, cough, the pox that swept through the last village you heard tell of. Survival is the first, hardest task, and most don't pass the test of their first few summers. Those who do, who cling stubbornly to life, are folded into the fabric of existence almost immediately. From the moment their legs are steady and their hands can grasp, they are part of the labor pool. Little more than toddlers might be set to watch younger siblings, their small bodies a warm shield against drafts. A few years older, and they are gathering fallen wood in the scrub, carrying water from the well, their backs bent early. Scaring birds from ripening grain is a constant, tedious job for quick young limbs. Tending the smallest livestock, the chickens, perhaps the goat, falls to them. Playtime is not a separate kingdom of imagination. It's a quick, practical mimicry of the world around them. A stick becomes a hoe, pebbles become livestock, mud is the dough. Their education isn't found in illuminated manuscripts. Few could read them anyway. But in the ache of their muscles, the rhythm of the seasons, the sharp lessons of hunger and cold, the swift punishment for a mistake that risks the meager harvest. There is no extended period of protected innocence. Childhood, as you might understand it in another time, simply does not exist here. They are miniature adults, integrated into the demanding cycle of survival. Their value is undeniably, perhaps brutally, measured by their capacity for labor. This stark reality, this swift integration into work and hardship, forces a confrontation with our modern separation of childhood from the adult world. Is something lost when young hands never learn the feel of soil turning, when young backs never know the satisfying weariness of honest, essential work? Your children grow up fast, witnessing death, enduring hunger, understanding the fragile line between enough and starvation before they understand simple sums. Their brief, often laborious youth is a poignant reminder of the economic scaffolding required to support the long, sheltered childhood that is now commonplace. It makes you wonder, was their exposure to the raw edges of life a cruelty, or did it forge a resilience, a practical competence, a deep connection to the necessities of existence that we, in our protected sphere, have long forgotten? It is a melancholy thought, watching them trudge home, carrying their load, their small faces already etched with a weariness that belies their years. The first light finds you checking the pigsty. Their snorts and grunts are the language of your larder, a promise of fat and meat to see you through the bitter months. These aren't companions with soft fur and playful antics. They are walking assets. Every pound of flesh, every squeal, a unit of potential survival. Your chickens scratch in the mud near the hut. They're clucking a mundane chorus that translates directly into eggs. Fragile sources of protein that can mean the difference between hunger and a barely full belly. Perhaps, if the soil is fertile and the Lord not too greedy, you have a cow. Her lowing is the sound of milk, of butter if you are fortunate, and crucially, of the rich, dark manure that feeds the fields, which in turn feed you. Oxen, if the village pools its meager resources, are beasts of burden beyond compare. Their slow, relentless pull, breaking the stubborn earth for the annual planting, a labor no human could sustain alone. Caring for them is relentless. Every dawn demands you ensure their shelter is sound against the rain and wind that bite like hungry wolves. You must find forage where you can, leading the pigs into the woods to root for acorns, guarding the sheep, if you have them, on the scrubland, forever vigilant against the actual wolves, or worse, the human thieves who are just as desperate as you. A sickness runs through the flock, a sudden weakness in the sow, a lame ox. These aren't just inconveniences. They are omens of potential disaster, points of vulnerability in the fragile wall between your family and starvation. Losing an animal is a blow that echoes for months, a gap in the larder, less manure for the soil, less hope for the harvest. Their health is literally your health. Their productivity, your family's future. Your relationship with these creatures is intense, but it is a relationship built on need, on resource management, forged in the crucible of constant want. There might be moments of warmth, a hand resting on the flank of a sturdy ox, a sigh of relief when the cow calves successfully, but this is tempered, always, by the stark reality. These are not pets, they are sustenance, labor, living capital. We look at animals today, separating our pampered companions from the anonymous sources of our food, shielded by walls and distance from the realities of blood and necessity. Your life demonstrates a relationship that is far more integrated, far more honest in its brutal practicality. Animals are not outside the household economy. They are a fundamental part of it. Their well-being is not a matter of sentiment. It is directly, terrifyingly tied to your own. It is a reminder of the deep, ancient symbiosis between humans and the creatures they shaped and were shaped by. A world away from comfort, where survival depended on understanding that the beast in the yard was not just life, but also death, waiting its turn. Ask yourself, could you see the living breath of an animal as primarily a unit of sustenance? The value of a sheep measured first in wool and meat, only second in warmth? Or would the modern heart break under the sheer weight of that pragmatic, unyielding necessity? The cold, seeps through the thatch roof and the cracks in the wattle and daub wall. Your hands, cracked and perpetually chapped, feel the chill deep in the bone. This is winter's dominion, a kingdom ruled by scarcity, where the dwindling stores of dried peas, salted meat, and preserved roots are counted daily. A silent sermon on the fragility of life. You pray for spring, yes, but it is a prayer born less of passive faith and more of a stark, biological imperative. It is the land itself, dormant and frozen, whispering its need for warmth, a need mirrored in your own aching joints and gnawing hunger. This prayer is the ancient wisdom, honed by generations who understood that life itself was a negotiation with the earth's turning wheel. Then comes the slow, reluctant thaw. The first fragile green shoots are less a sign of beauty than a signal for frantic, back-breaking labor. Spring arrives not with gentle breezes, but with mud, cold rain, and the desperate rush to plow fields still sodden from winter snowmelt. Every hour of daylight is precious. You work until your back screams, until your hands bleed on the rough handles of the wooden plow. This is a season of hope, yes, but it is a hope forged in exhaustion, fueled by the terrifying knowledge that the entire year's sustenance depends on the success of these few brutal weeks. Superstitions bloom alongside the wildflowers, rituals to appease the earth spirits, prayers for a cooperative sun, fear of omens that might curse the seed before it even takes root. Was it faith that drove them to their knees in the newly turned soil, pleading for abundance, or the raw animal fear of starving next winter? It's hard to separate the two when hunger is the most persuasive preacher. Summer arrives, a time of relentless, sun-baked growth, but also of constant vigilance. The fields are greening, thick with young grain, but this new life is vulnerable. Weeds are a constant enemy, demanding hours bent double under the oppressive sun. Pests, blights, sudden, violent storms. Any one of these can shatter the fragile promise of the harvest. The tension is palpable. The long days are filled with hard work, but also with a quiet, internal anxiety. You watch the sky, you check the crops, you whisper prayers against mildew and locusts. Your diet shifts, maybe a little more fresh greens from a small garden plot, a few berries, but the core remains the same. Whatever was stored, supplemented by whatever can be foraged. There is no surplus, only the nervous anticipation of the next crucial stage. The sheer, naked dependence on external forces, sun, rain, wind, highlights a fundamental truth. Your existence is woven directly into the fabric of the natural world. Then the harvest, the most crucial, the most demanding season. It is a race against time, against the weather. When the grain ripens, every single able body is needed in the fields. The scythes swing, the sheaves are bound, the carts piled high. Men, women, children, everyone works from dawn till dusk. Muscles screaming, faces streaked with sweat and dust. This is the peak of the year's labor, a period of intense communal effort. The relief when the last load is brought in is profound but fleeting. Immediately, the focus shifts to preservation. Animals must be slaughtered, a grim, necessary task, filling the air with the scent of blood and iron. Meat is salted, smoked, dried, grains threshed and stored, fruits dried or fermented. This is the ancient wisdom of survival. Extract everything you can from the brief moment of plenty and lock it away against the coming lean times. The physical toll is immense, but the alternative is starvation. And so, the cycle returns to winter. Shorter days, the bitter cold, the quiet of the land. Food is scarce, energy levels drop. This is the time for mending tools, weaving cloth, spinning yarn. It's also a time for gathering by the fire, for storytelling. Tales of saints and sinners, of heroes and monsters, but also stories rooted in the land, in the seasons, in the struggles they've just endured. These stories are more than entertainment. They are repositories of community knowledge, of history, of shared identity forged in the crucible of the turning year. Your life is a pendulum, swinging from the frantic energy of planting and harvest to the forced stillness and quiet desperation of winter. Unlike your existence, ours is largely insulated. The seasons change outside our heated homes, but the supermarket shelves remain full. Food arrives from thousands of miles away, independent of local sun or rain. Electric light extends our days artificially, blurring the ancient boundaries between work and rest, light and dark. What do we lose, divorced from this fundamental rhythm? From the visceral knowledge that your life depends directly on the earth's pulse. The medieval soul understood, on a fundamental level, that humanity was within nature, not separate from it. Ask yourself, can you even imagine your life dictated so entirely by the sun's journey across the sky and the earth's fertile silence? Their existence wasn't just lived on the land, it was lived by the land. The ache in your back, the chill that settles deep in your bones, even in high summer, these are the familiar companions of your life. The world outside your village feels impossibly distant, filled with whispers of kings you'll never see, and troubles that seem unreal next to the urgent reality of your own patch of earth, your own hungry mouths. Survival is a low, constant hum, sometimes swelling to a roar during famine or sickness. Yet, amidst the relentless turning of the year, the endless cycle of planting, weeding, harvesting, and praying, there are breaks, moments where the burden lifts, if only for a precious few days. The bells ring differently on these days. Not the sober call to matins or the urgent clang of alarm, but a joyful, insistent peal that seems to shake the very air with anticipation. It's a feast day. Perhaps it's Christmas, when the cold bites hardest, but the promise of light returning feels most vital. Perhaps Easter, a celebration of resurrection that mirrors the earth's hesitant awakening. Or maybe it's the day of a local saint, revered for miraculous interventions close to home, whose story is as real to you as the sweat on your brow. On these days, labor stops. The fields lie fallow. The loom falls silent. The forge cools. It feels almost illicit, this sudden stillness after months of relentless toil. You wash your face, maybe even put on a slightly less patched tunic, a small, significant act. Food is better. Perhaps not the roasted swan of the Lord's table, but perhaps a rare taste of meat, saved or gifted, or bread made with finer flour, a richer stew thickened with precious beans. Ale flows more freely, its warmth a welcome counterpoint to the ever-present chill. Laughter rings out, not the weary chuckle of resignation, but genuine, uninhibited mirth. There is music, a rebec scraped with clumsy joy, a pipe playing simple, lively tunes. People dance, circling awkwardly, but with deep pleasure, a release of pent-up energy and stress. Children run wild, unchecked by the usual need for their small hands to help. These celebrations are more than just entertainment. They are essential survival mechanisms. They are the pressure valves that keep the community from fracturing under the strain. By providing a collective release, a shared moment of abundance, however modest, they bind people together, reinforcing social ties and offering psychological strength to face the hardships that will inevitably return. The church calendar, the agricultural cycle, these are just markers of time. They are the deliberate architects of these vital pauses. Without the promise of St. John's Day dancing or the Christmas feast, how would one endure the months of back-breaking work or the gnawing fear of starvation? It's an insight. These seemingly simple joys are intricately woven into the fabric of survival, as necessary as seed and soil. They aren't earned through merit, but through the patient, enduring passage of time, marked by faith and the turning seasons. Sometimes, the respite comes not in a feast, but in a journey, a rare trip to a nearby market town. The walk is long, the road potentially dangerous. Whispers of bandits or wolves are never far from mind, but the reward is immense. The market square is a riot of sound and color compared to your quiet village. Traders from other regions speaking with strange accents. Goods you rarely see, salt, spices, finer cloth, tools. News travels here, carried on the tongues of merchants and travelers. You hear fragments of events from far-off lands, stories of battles or plagues that make your own village feel blessedly or perhaps terrifyingly isolated. You might sell a small surplus, a few eggs, some homespun linen, or buy something desperately needed, a new spade head, or a length of rough wool. It's a glimpse of a wider world, a reminder that life exists beyond the fields you know intimately. These moments, whether a village feast or a market day, are savored with an intensity we might struggle to understand in our time of constant stimulation. There is no endless stream of entertainment, no easy distraction from discomfort or worry. Your pleasures are fewer, simpler, and therefore perhaps imbued with a deeper significance. They are hard-won, brief respites from the relentless demands of existence. They remind you that human resilience isn't just about enduring hardship with a grim face, but also about the profound, almost sacred act of finding and cherishing moments of lightness and connection, of celebrating survival itself amidst the struggle. Ask yourself, when joy is this scarce, this hard-earned, does it land with a force that cuts through everything, leaving an imprint that fuels endurance until the next bell tolls for celebration? Or is its fleeting nature a cruel mirror showing you what life could be, only to snatch it away again? They live for these sparks, these islands in the ocean of hardship, and perhaps, in doing so, they find a richness in scarcity that we, in our abundance, have lost. The air crackles with tension, not the excitement of market day, but the tight, nervous energy of a quarrel brought before the village. You stand at the edge of the crowd, watching old Thomas and young Will square off. It started over a fence line, a few feet of muddy earth between their potato patches. But here, a few feet can mean the difference between meager survival and outright hunger. Or perhaps it was the stray pig of Will's that rooted up Thomas's cabbages. Whatever the spark, the fire has caught, threatening to scorch the delicate peace of this tight-knit world. This is village justice, not in some distant castle hall, but here, where everyone knows your name, your father's name, and probably your grandfather's too. Authority sits not on a high throne, but often on a simple stool under the old oak tree, or at a plain table in the Lord's manor house when the bailiff visits. Today, it is the reeve, a man elected from among you, and perhaps a few respected elders, listening, frowning. There are no lawyers in this picture, no parchment scrolls of complex statutes you couldn't read anyway. Just accusations, heated denials, and the quiet whispers of neighbors who saw, or thought they saw, or just want to see it settled, so life can return to the rhythm of the seasons. The process is swift, brutally so. Testimony is given, often impassioned, sometimes weaving truth with bitter grievance accumulated over years. The reeve listens, weighs reputations, considers local customs passed down through generations, traditions that might hold more sway here than any law from the distant king's court. What is right is often what the village agrees is right, what maintains the precarious balance. Justice is public, immediate. There's no hiding your shame or your punishment behind stone walls. If you are found wrong, the consequences are laid bare for all to see and remember. Punishments mirror the practical, often brutal reality of life. A fine is common, measured in the currency that matters most. Sacks of grain from your next harvest, a promised piglet, or a few shillings if coin is circulating. This impacts your ability to feed your family, a direct consequence of your actions. For something there is no escape, no appeal to a higher court that might see things differently. Once the reeve or the Lord's court makes a judgment, it is usually final. Your fate is sealed by the very community you rely on for survival. This lack of recourse, this absolute local power, can feel stifling, arbitrary even. If the Lord's man dislikes you, or the reeve owes old Thomas a favor, the judgment might feel anything but fair. Yet, this system also underscores the incredible interdependence of village life. Your actions have immediate, visible consequences for your standing among your neighbors and the officials who hold sway over your land and livelihood. There is little room for deceit or prolonged conflict. It must be resolved, one way or another, so that the vital work of farming and surviving can continue. It feels harsh, lacking the intricate procedures we take for granted, but it perfectly reflects the power structures of the time. Authority is personal, local, tied to land and lineage. Conflict is seen as a disruption to the necessary order of the harvest and the community, and must be suppressed quickly. Ask yourself, as you watch Thomas and Will walk, it makes you wonder about the nature of justice itself. Always a mirror, reflecting the fears, values, and stark realities of the age that shapes it. The world ends at the river bend, or maybe the ridge where the ancient oaks stand like stoic sentinels. From the doorway of your wattle and daub home, you can see the edge of your universe, the familiar fields, the cluster of other huts, the church spire reaching hopefully towards a heaven you can only imagine. Beyond that, whispers, tales carried on the wind from peddlers with dust on their boots, stories spun by the fire on long winter nights. You can mend a roof, birth a lamb, read the coming storm in the clouds. This knowledge is life itself, passed down through generations, etched into your muscles and memory. Yet, ask you how the sun travels across the sky, and you will tell you it is God's chariot, or perhaps pulled by angels. Ask why the child withered and died, and the answer might be the evil eye, or a demon slipping through a crack in the world. The church is the mapmaker of your universe. It is the framework through which all misfortune and fortune are understood. A good harvest is God's blessing. A bad one? Perhaps a punishment, or the work of malevolent spirits, stirred by some forgotten sin. This isn't ignorance as we understand it. It is a different kind of knowing, a world woven from faith, folklore, and the raw, undeniable reality of nature. You don't have scrolls or maps of distant lands, but you have a detailed mental map of every stone, stream, and tree within walking distance. You understand the intricate social hierarchy of your village better than any modern sociologist could. Every unspoken rule, every simmering feud, every shared grief. While we are awash in data from every corner of the globe, feeling both hyper-connected and perhaps rootless, your world is circumscribed, but deeply rooted. It forces a profound engagement with the immediate environment, a constant negotiation with the known and feared unknown. Was their limited horizon a prison? Or did it allow for a depth of connection to their immediate world that we have lost? Did the ever-present belief in the supernatural make their lives harder? Or did it provide a framework, a narrative, however terrifying, for a world they could not otherwise explain? Perhaps the greatest surprising insight is how universally human it is to fill the gaps in knowledge with story, with faith, with fear. Our universe is vast beyond measure, but theirs, though tiny by comparison, was perhaps just as full of wonder, terror, and the quiet, persistent effort to simply understand what it means to be alive within its bounds. The worn track gives way to a wider, muddier rut. You step onto the road proper, the known path behind you shrinking with every pace. The familiar scent of your village hearth fades, replaced by damp earth, distant wood smoke from unseen farms, and the sharp, wild tang of the woods drawing closer. This is a rare day. To leave the village is an event whispered about for weeks, prepared for with solemnity. You carry a small, tightly bound pack, a loaf of stale bread, a lump of cheese wrapped in cloth, a water skin, maybe a few coins painstakingly saved, or perhaps a single precious item to trade at the market you hope to reach days from now. The journey ahead is not measured in miles you can easily comprehend, but in days. Days walking under an indifferent sky. Days of putting one heavy boot before the other. A mere 50 miles feels like a crossing into a foreign land, a passage into the largely unknown. The roads are not roads as you understand them today. They are trails worn by generations of carts and feet, often little more than mud and stones, prone to flooding, disappearing entirely in dense forest. You walk with a constant, low hum of vigilance. Every rustle in the undergrowth could be a wild dog, a boar, or worse, a human with ill intent. Bandits are a real fear, a story traded by hearthlight. Now, a potential reality lurking just beyond the next bend. Getting lost isn't a minor inconvenience. It could mean days wandering without food or water, ending in cold, silent death. You rely on instinct, the position of the sun, and the scant, sometimes contradictory directions given by those few who have walked this way before. A crossroads feels like a momentous decision point, a place where prayer feels particularly urgent. You might carry a saint's medal, a charm against the evil eye, or simply touch the rough wooden cross, marking the beginning of a treacherous stretch of woods. For every step you take away from the familiar bells of your village church, the world grows larger, more uncertain, and infused with a deeper sense of the unknown. Your known world is measured by the fields you work, the woods you hunt, the river that bounds your land. This journey pushes those boundaries, revealing glimpses of a reality that feels vast and potentially hostile. Survival on the road is a delicate dance of caution and reliance on the kindness of strangers, or the necessity of bartering for a night's shelter in a peasant's hovel, a corner of a monastery guest house, or a rough inn catering to the few who travel. You trade news, offer a hand with chores, anything for safety and a bit of warmth. The tales you hear from others on the road, a merchant describing a distant city, a pilgrim recounting a miracle at a shrine many days away, a soldier sharing rumors of war. They are priceless. They are your only window into the world beyond the horizon, shaping your understanding of lands you will likely never see. This isolation isn't just geographical, it's informational. Your village exists in its own bubble of time and awareness. News travels slower than a lame donkey. A major event happening a week's walk away might arrive months later, distorted by rumor and fear. When you return, your pack might hold a few simple goods, a tool not made locally, a bolt of cloth, salt perhaps, but your true cargo is the news. You are the temporary oracle, the one who has seen beyond the known world. People gather, hanging on your every word, eager for details about the market, the roads, the faces you saw, the things you heard. Your perspective, however limited by our standards, is profoundly broadened compared to those who never leave. Consider the sheer courage it took to step out of the known into the physical unknown, relying solely on your feet, your wits, and perhaps the grace of God. This wasn't leisure, it was necessity, or deep spiritual calling. It underscores how small the average human world was for millennia. Most people lived and died within the sound of their village bells. Their understanding of the world was hyper-local, shaped by the rhythm of seasons, the demands of the land, the gossip of neighbors, and the pronouncements of the priest. Contrast this with your ability to cross oceans in hours, to see the surface of another planet on a screen, to talk instantly with someone on the opposite side of the globe. Our concept of world is infinite and immediate. Theirs was finite, tangible, and often terrifying just 50 miles away. Your journey, though short, was an act of pushing against the limits of your known existence, a fleeting taste of a larger, more dangerous world. It reminds us that freedom of movement, speed of travel, and access to information are not ancient rights, but modern miracles. Ask yourself, what does it mean to truly know only a tiny patch of earth? How does isolation shape fear, trust, and the very definition of other? Would the unknown road beckon you, or would the safety of the known path hold you captive? You wake before dawn, the cold seeping through the straw mattress, through the rough-spun wool. The fire banked low, just embers clutching desperately at the chill. Outside, the wind sighs like a lament through the bare branches. Another day is coming, another day of aching backs, calloused hands, and the ceaseless grind of keeping body and soul together. But in this quiet moment, before the demands of the world crash in, you have dreams. They are not the sprawling, impossible landscapes of future conquests or chests overflowing with foreign gold that fill the tales of minstrels. Your dreams are rooted in the very earth you work, tethered to the vulnerable bodies of those you love. You don't dream of fame, You dream of flour barrels that stay full through the long winter. You don't dream of power. You dream of the sun shining just right on the ripening wheat, promising a better harvest than the last. A harvest that won't leave gnawing hunger in your gut come spring. You dream of your children, not as future rulers or scholars, but simply alive. You watch their thin chests rise and fall in the dark. Listen to the rasping coughs that pierce the quiet, and your heart constricts. A dream is your eldest son growing strong enough to walk behind the plow beside you, sharing the burden. A dream is your daughter, blessed with a kind nature and perhaps a small dowry you scrape together coin by precious coin, finding a good man, a good family, a measure of security you yourself might never fully possess. This isn't ambition in the modern sense. It's the fierce, primal hope for continuity, for your bloodline to simply survive the relentless attrition of disease and scarcity. Perhaps, nestled deep beneath the crushing weight of your obligations, there is a smaller, more personal hope. Enough coin put aside, not for luxury, but for a better axe head, one that won't break mid-chop, saving precious time and energy. Or the truly audacious, almost unthinkable dream for a peasant bound to the land. Enough saved, enough favor earned, enough stars aligned to somehow, impossibly, buy your freedom. To shed the chains, however invisible, that tie you and your descendants to this plot of earth, this lord, this endless cycle of labor. A fragile, dangerous dream, often whispered only to oneself or a trusted few, lest it invite scorn or punishment. And transcending all earthly longings, the ultimate, all-consuming dream, salvation. To navigate this treacherous, sin-filled life without falling prey to temptation, to confess, to repent, to receive the sacraments, and finally, at the last breath, to be deemed worthy by a merciful God, to escape the suffering of this earthly existence, the pain, the hunger, the loss, and find eternal rest, eternal light in heaven. This hope isn't passive. It shapes your days, dictates your fears. You don't steal that loaf of bread, not just because of the reeve's lash, but because you risk your eternal soul. You cross yourself, not just out of habit, but because every demon lurking in the fog, every ill fortune is a test, and failure means damnation. The desire for salvation is the most potent dream of all, a stark contrast to the tangible, earthly hopes, yet utterly intertwined, offering the only true escape from the harsh reality. These dreams, a full belly, healthy children, a sturdy tool, maybe freedom, and certainly salvation, reveal a profound truth. The human spirit, even when constrained by unbelievable hardship and limitation, refuses to surrender hope. Your aspirations aren't about self-fulfillment or traveling the world. They are about basic needs, about protecting those you love, about securing a minimal foothold against a hostile reality. They are tangible, tied to the soil, the body, the soul. We dream of careers, experiences, abstract goals. You dream of survival and continuity. Yet, look closer. The fundamental need to hope for a better future, for security, for family, for peace, that echoes across the centuries. The objects of desire are different, dictated by the constraints and opportunities of your world versus ours, but the quiet whisper in the heart, the yearning for tomorrow to be less brutal than today, that remains unchanged. Your simple hopes, born of dust and desperation, are a direct lineage to the hopes that drive billions today, just repackaged for a different age. They remind us that the strength of humanity lies not just in grand achievements, but in the persistent, quiet capacity to dream of better days, even when dawn brings only more toil. Ask yourself, in a world where your dreams are so heavily dictated by necessity and survival, is there still room for something uniquely you? Or do you dream only what the world permits? You have walked a year, or perhaps a lifetime, in the worn shoes of a medieval peasant. You have felt the ache of labor, the gnawing of hunger, the solace of community. You have carried the weight of obligation, found comfort and fear in faith, and felt the constant, chilling presence of death, offset only by the quiet miracle of a new dawn or a successful harvest. Their lives were brutal by our standards, short, physically demanding, limited in scope, defined by forces seemingly beyond control, from the Lord's whim to the indifferent sky. Yet they endured. They found moments of brittle joy by the flickering hearth. They loved fiercely beneath thatched roofs. They worshipped with hearts raw with hope and terror. They built communities that lasted for centuries against the tide of hardship. What does this journey into their mud and blood-stained world reveal about our own? We have conquered many of the overt enemies they faced. Mass starvation is rare in the developed world. Disease is often curable. Information is abundant. Physical labor is an option, not a mandate for many. We have unprecedented freedom to move, to speak, to choose. But have we truly evolved in our core humanity? Or have we simply exchanged their primal fears for our own more complex anxieties, economic insecurity, social isolation, existential dread in the face of a chaotic world, the relentless, exhausting pressure of progress? They no longer feared the devil lurking in the tangled woods, yet perhaps we fear the collapse of complex, unseen systems we barely understand, the fragile networks that feed and shelter us. They relied on physical neighbors for your life, lived on the razor's edge of survival in their time, highlights the fundamental human capacity for resilience, for adaptation, for finding meaning even when meaning seems buried under mud and misery. They feared the devil's breath on their neck, whispered prayers against the plague, and yet still planted their seeds in the cold ground every spring, fueled by nothing more than a fragile, defiant hope. We, perhaps, fear tomorrow's headlines, the algorithms we don't understand, the world spinning out of control, and yet we still plant our own forms of hope in careers we build, relationships we nurture, or simply the quiet belief that the sun will rise, offering another chance. The medieval peasant struggle wasn't just about the grim, physical survival of the body. It was about the survival of the spirit in a world that and in that quiet, defiant endurance, in the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other through the mud, in the shared warmth of a single fire, their heartbeat echoes in our own, 1,000 years later. They had no legacy carved in stone, but every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror, built the world we now take for granted.